History is defined by greats. We all know this. There are great and notable kings, great people, and of course, great engineers. Stephenson, Gooch and Brassey were to name a few. Their engines were the best in the world and are still celebrated. However, while these engines are famous, many forget what these engines run on. And at the cradle of the great railway network was a man that is responsible for building the equivalent of 1 mile for every 20 miles in all the railways in all the world. The village of Burton in Cheshire may be small, but its origins go back over 1,000 years. In 1805, just 39 people lived there. This included the Brassey family. They lived in the farm named Buckley Grange, and it was in this year that the Brassey family welcomed Thomas into the world. Thomas was homeschooled until the age of 12, when he was sent to a boarding school. Thomas wasn't described as gifted or even exceptional, but he did well in school, and by the time he was finished at 16, he landed an apprenticeship with a local land agent. Where he was average in school, Thomas excelled in the workplace, and it wasn't long before his boss made him a partner in the business. Branching out from land surveying, the duo watched the small port of Birkenhead grow as more trade from ever was starting to arrive, and soon it was requiring more buildings. Thomas set up a new enterprise, building a new brickworks to supply the material for a new customs house, and it was his dealings within the town that put his name with the Harrison family, eventually finding love with a young girl named Maria. His success led him to other avenues and new business deals. While Thomas was working hard on his various ventures, the ground was being cut on a very famous railway line. George Stephenson was very well aware he needed raw materials to make his line work, including large stone blocks for the viaduct at Sankey. Brassey had moved into the quarry industry and was perfectly poised to provide the stone. Stephenson was impressed with Thomas's enthusiasm, while Thomas had quite literally got the railway bug. If this new mode of transport worked, it would revolutionise everything from moving freight to moving people. Settling down in Birkenhead, Thomas tried for several new railway contracts, eventually getting the go-ahead to build 10 miles of track, including a viaduct between Stafford and Wolverhampton. It was within this little deal that Thomas met an engineering giant. Joseph Locke would be Thomas's partner, mentor and boss. While George Stephenson was focused on the working parts of the railway, Joseph was more keen on the surveying side, and sometimes the two engineers didn't see eye to eye. When Joseph left George's company, he met Thomas, and the two not only formed a great business bond, but the pair were best of friends. The pair worked on the London to Southampton line, where the work was done to such a high degree, additional railway work soon followed. Brassey and Locke were in the thick of the railway mania and both took full advantage. Across the English Channel, the French were eager to get their own slice of railway pie, and in 1841 offered Thomas to partner up with his rival William Mackenzie. Thomas did an amazing job, and with Mackenzie by his side in 14 years, he had built 3/4 of the French network. Mackenzie would never see the culmination of his work, as he passed away in 1851, leaving Thomas to finish it alone. Although a new prospect meant moving his now growing family around the country, and now France, Thomas's wife Maria and his 3 sons were ever supportive. But after France, the family settled down in London while Thomas worked away. Thanks to Joseph's careful teaching, Thomas knew that the value of the railway and its longevity lay not only in just good materials, but the importance of a solid foundation underneath. He instructed his team to take their time and survey the land and areas carefully. He taught them how to check the soil type, how the environment would affect the line, and most importantly, the importance of knowing the water table. All of this helped the workers not only plot the best possible route, but select the best materials for the area and help plan the location and placement of bridges and viaducts. The most important factor to any railway boss was time and money, and thanks to Brassey's work, the railway bosses now saw savings in both of these areas. One of the other knacks Brassey had was knowing the best men for the job. The majority of the workforce in the railway building world were navvies. These were men that moved from railway to railway seeking work where they can. Brassey sought out experienced workers and was very particular in recruiting. As a result, the men were highly motivated and productive. Although the work was dangerous and the hours long, Brassey paid them handsomely, much more than the average worker. This, however, led to its own problems, as the men usually spent their money on nighttime activities, and it wasn't unusual that both they and the local police clashed on many occasions. The men, though, respected Brassey, and he in turn would spend time with them. Not only would he know many by name, but he went out of his way to personally teach the men new techniques and skills. By the mid-1840s, Brassey's workforce had swelled to over 80,000 men, both engaged in projects in the UK and now stretching into Europe. He would visit each project in turn, and in every country he would always receive a warm welcome. His projects were spanning the globe, and soon it would be his turn to appoint the engineering greats to help oversee the track build. His work was giving him a reputation, and his working methods were not only being sought after, but being copied and replicated. But it was not all sunshine and rainbows, and like every great, Thomas had challenges. One challenge in particular was the construction of one of the longest railroads in his life, the Grand Trunk Railway of Canada. At 512 miles long, it was tipped to be the longest railroad in the world. He partnered up with Sir Morton Peto and Edward Betts. Betts had money in railroads, so had some capital, whilst Peto had access to building material. It seemed initially a win-win situation, so Brassey invested heavily himself. But just to be sure, a fourth partner, Sir William Jackson, was brought in, and he brought in as security his brother-in-law George Harrison, who was now manager surveyor. With Harrison and the other partners overseeing the work, initially the work went well and progressed smoothly. So smoothly that Thomas decided to leave them to it. However, in 1854, tensions were mounting over the new Montreal-Victoria Bridge. The limestone for the bridge was found nearby. However, this cut through a native Federation Indian reserve. The Mohawk Indians were not in the mood to negotiate, citing the young engineer that represented the railroad, a chap called Hodges, was not senior or wise enough to have any meaningful conversation. It took several days for the site manager to convince them that he was as old as they were, and eventually the Mohawks agreed to the quarrying of their land. Around the same time, cholera hit the work camps, and a dam necessary for the railroad had been destroyed by a coffer of logs. Each setback hit the bosses' pockets hard, and unable to satisfy the workforce that their pay and health was guaranteed, the workers began to strike. As the Canadian winter bit the workforce hard, Brassey, hearing of the failing railroad, set off personally to see what he could do to help. He was greeted like a hero in New York, and nothing was too much for him. But Thomas had work to do, and with the Canadian government threatening to shut down the entire project, Thomas headed north as fast as possible. Thomas negotiated with the government and begged them to keep the project afloat. In the meantime, he called upon his ties with his own workforce in the UK, and 3,000 skilled workers were shipped to help finish the line. These men were the best of the best and the most skilled in their field. Brassey put everything he possessed on the line. They had to finish this railroad, and knew if it failed, he would be completely sunk, and no amount of reputation would save him. His actions though paid off, and in 1859, not only was the bridge finished, but the majority of the track, enough so that the local workforce could finish the rest with little fuss. Brassey had lost millions on the job, but his reputation and his dignity was saved. Although the Grand Trunk Railroad had cost him half of his fortune, Thomas pressed on with his other ventures and contracts that he already had. Thomas, though, was starting to feel the weight of his work bearing on him. He was in his 50s and was now considered to be in the latter stages of his life. Many of his partners he had worked with had already passed on, but with many new projects still to do, he felt compelled to speed on. By the age of 60, Thomas watched on proud as his eldest son had become elected to be an MP and had bought land near the coast. Leaving the city of London behind, Thomas moved with his family to St Leonards-on-Sea to live a comfortable, spacious and quiet country home. Thomas's health, though, was beginning to fail him. Following a bout of illness in the May of 1867, he was left weak, and this weakness would worsen in the October when he was left stranded on the opening of the Mont-Cenis railway in France, when both the main and the backup engine failed. With no option but to walk in a blizzard in the middle of the Alps, Thomas caught bronchitis, but determined to meet his business requirements, he travelled through Europe with a blinding fever, even managing to broker major deals while almost delirious. Maria, worried for her husband, brought him home to rest, but even resting he took letters and gave advice. In 1868 he suffered a stroke and suffered with limited use of his left-hand side. His friends and family all took it as a sign he had to retire, but Thomas refused to entertain such a notion. But in 1870, following a bout of illness, the doctors gave him devastating news. He had cancer and he was terminal. Thomas knew to quit was to die, and he spurred on, continued to visit his contracting sites. It was only a few months later that the pain from the cancer was too much to bear, and he became bedridden. Hundreds of people, both from the highest order of society to the lowly plate layer, came to see him. Thomas, despite his pain, would accept them all and shake their hands, thanking them for their hard work. Thomas died on the 8th of December and was buried quietly in the local churchyard at Catsfield. It is impossible to say just how many thousands of miles of tracks he had a hand in. In India, his lines are the main lifeblood of the country. The Canadian Trunk Road is still going strong. It's under new management, Canadian National Railways, and has grown to include new branch lines that sink deep into America. In the UK, many of the lines he built are still in operation, and many viaducts and bridges are a testament to his skills. Thomas had a saying, "I want my line to look the same in 99 years as the day I built it." As some areas he helped build are now reaching nearly 108 years and still going strong, he's definitely outdone himself.